Welcome to Good Horses, the podcast of the American Quarter Horse Association, where we talk about good horses. My name's Jim Jennings, and today in our Legends Remembered segment of Good Horses, we're going to talk about another of the legends in our industry. In Legends Remembered, we talk about some of the horses that have been inducted into the American Quarter Horse Hall of Fame, which is the highest honor that can be achieved in our industry. Our subject today is Highbrow Cat, the all-time leading sire of cutting horses and the all-time leading money-earning sire of the American Quarter Horse Association across all disciplines. As of today, his foals have earned nearly $97 million. Highbrow Cat was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2023, and in March of that year, I sat down with the man who is most responsible for Highbrow Cat's career, Jack Wagner. During our interview, Jack talked about the horse that he loved probably more than anything in the world. But he started by talking about how he got into the horse business.
I was Roy Rogers as a little boy until I wasn't a little boy anymore. And I always loved horses and dogs and cattle. And so I bought Santa Gratuitous cattle from the King Ranch. And I had a bunch of them, and I had a ranch down down near Huntsville. And I had quite a few cattle there, and I'd never ridden a horse. And a fellow down there said, "Look, you're going to have to get a horse if you're going to help me here." I said, "Okay, let's get a horse." So he brought a horse, and I was riding the horse, and I thought, that's pretty good. And so I went up to the Waggoner ranch because Wagner, and I bought a little filly. And I had to buy a Palomino because Roy Rogers. And I bought a little filly, and she was wild as a March hare. She had never had a rope on her or anything. And I finally had a vet had to dart her to catch her. And we broke her, and then I sent her over to train her, and she turned into be a big pet. And she was a nice horse, and never did train her to cut, but rode her. And I met some people that were cutting horse people, and I got interested in cutting. And I went to a couple of cuttings, and so I started to buy cutting horses, and I raised cutting horses. And there was a fella named Dub, and I forget Dub's last name, and pardon me. I think he's gone now. But he sold me some mares, and I bred the mares, and then I kind of figured it out and said, you're going to have to get some good horses if you want to go compete. So I started going to the auctions, and I started to talk to people, and I ran into Doc's Kitty. And I looked up and found that Shorty Freeman rode Doc's Kitty, and she was probably the best mare that Doc Bar ever produced. And I went and found her, and I tried to buy her and couldn't buy her. And she was built like I thought a cutting horse ought to be built. Little short cannon bones, and she was just a fabulous mare. And her record was fabulous, too.
Doc's Kitty was owned by Haynes Chatham of Pilot Point, Texas, and Stuart Sewell of Jacksboro, Texas. They had bought the mare to breed to Smart Little Lena, which Haynes owned, and they named the resulting foal Smart Little Kitty. They had every intention of showing Smart Little Kitty, but she lost an eye in an accident as a weanling. So in 1987, they bred her to a son of Doc's Hickory called Highbrow Hickory. Highbrow Hickory had been the Open Reserve champion in the 1986 NCHA Futurity, and he had earned right at $223,000 in the cutting arena. On top of that, he was making a name for himself as a sire and would eventually sire earners of more than $5 million. But in 1988, Haynes decided he needed to cut down on some of his horse numbers. The economy was not particularly good in the mid to late 1980s, and the horse industry was suffering. Haynes talked to his partner, Stuart Sewell, and they decided to sell Smart Little Kitty, which was now in foal to Highbrow Hickory. They consigned her to the National Cutting Horse Association Super Stakes sale. However, 9 days before the sale, the mare foaled, and mare and foal went through the ring together.
So I looked and tried to find a kid out of her somewhere, and I went to an auction and bought Smart Little Kitty, and she happened to have a little colt on her, just born within a week. And the colt was by Highbrow Hickory. Pardon me. That baby was the smartest thing. I had dogs, and he was as smart as any dog going. And we played hide and go seek. I didn't have that many horses, but I had enough to take my time, but I played with him. And he would hide behind his mother, and I'd chase him around. Then he'd go hide again. Then I'd hide, and he'd find me, and he was just like a kid. And then he got weaned, and he got out with some other yearlings, and he would go tease them and get them running after each other, and then he'd go stand and watch them. And he was the smartest thing. Then he'd play with dogs, and he was more like a dog than a horse. And so it was time to ride him, and a fellow named Shane Rudeball worked for me, and he started him, and both Shane and I rode him, and we put a saddle on him, and he kind of looked to see what that was, and looked around, and Shane stepped on the side of him, and he kind of looked at Shane, and Shane got on him, and he walked off. So I got on him. He just walked off. It's fine. Okay, whatever you want. And I sent him to Fair and Hightower. And I remember the day after I sent him Fair and said, look, I think we'd be better to cut this horse because I can work better with a gelding. And I said, no, he's intact, and he's going to stay intact. And so Farron trained him, and he did a good job training. Farron's a tremendous hand. He's just a great trainer, or was. And he went to the fraternity, and Farron had told me, I went and watched him sometime, and when they went over to the stop, he'd stop, and Farron would jerk his mouth. And you can tell Cat didn't care for that at all. So the first time in the fraternity he was turned loose, he ran over there and stopped and stayed there. He said, you're going to jerk me? I'm not moving. So that was the end of the big fraternity.
When Jack turned Highbrow Cat over to Fair and Hightower to get him ready to show in the 1991 NCHA fraternity, Farron saw right quick that Highbrow Cat was not going to be an easy trainee, but he could tell that the horse was really cowy. At the fraternity in the first go-round, when Farron and Highbrow Cat brought their first cow out of the herd, Highbrow Cat turned the cow once and then froze. The cow trotted back to the herd, and Farron rode the horse out of the arena.
Right after the fraternity, Mel Bradford put on a little fraternity. Cat won it easy. I mean, he was the only horse there that really did well. And there were a lot of horses, not near as many as in the big fraternity, but there still were quite a few. And he won that. And then he went on and won some others. And then Farron had some problems, and Jody Gallion showed him a couple of times, and then Bill Freeman showed him a couple of times. And I was in the middle of the quarter horse industry at that time. But he was, he just was an amazing horse.
Like Jack said, in 1992, they showed at a few other cuttings, and by year's end had earned about $30,000. The next year, Farron took Highbrow Cat to the Augusta fraternity at Augusta, Georgia, and won the Classic Open, which turned out to be the biggest cutting the horse would win. Then Jody Gallion and Bill Freeman showed him some, and by the time he was retired in 1995, he had earned just under $111,000.
But he was that kind of horse. When he was shown, you know how everybody has to lope down the horse, and some of them lope for hours and hours. Farron or Bill or whoever showed him would take him around once to loosen him up, one lap, that was it, and then he got a show. But he knew what was expected of him, and that's what he did. But he won several shows, and then several shows he was in the finals and didn't mark enough to win, but he was second or third all the time. But he was a fun horse to show. And then his get started to win, and we had Pretty Boy Cat won Augusta. Red Feather won a lot. A lot of them started that we had, and then other people had, and then his get won the fraternity 8 times, and the second to that was 3 times.
By the time he was retired from competition, Highbrow Cat had 3 foal crops on the ground. When the horse was only 2, Jack bred 7 mares to him. He owned all of them. The next year, 1994, he got 17 foals, and the next year he got 12. They all belonged to Jack. Due to the horse's reputation as being hard to train and his somewhat lackluster show career, there was not a single outside mare bred to him. Then, at the 1996 NCHA fraternity, 2 horses out of that first foal crop made the finals, and one, Cat Summertime, who was out of a daughter of Doc's Lynx, tied for 6th under Bill Freeman. The other one, Cat's Got Ya, tied for 11th with Pete Fanning. All but one of those first 7 foals would earn money in cutting, and the one who didn't died before it could be shown. People were still skeptical of Highbrow Cat, but at the 1997 fraternity, things began to change. Phil Rapp rode Cat's Bobby Sox to 3rd in the non-pro, and in the open, Papillon Cat tied for 6th with Kobe Wood, and Catastic made the semifinals under Bronk Willoughby. With that, public opinion began to change about Highbrow Cat. More than 100 mares were bred to him during the 1998 season. Except for the year 2000, from his first crop, which began showing in 1996, through 2002, Highbrow Cat was represented by at least 1 or 2 offspring in every NCHA fraternity open finals. In 1998, Bill Freeman rode Cats to a tie for 7th in the open fraternity finals, and Michelle Mowry on Cat's Blue Jeans tied for 5th in the non-pro. In 1999, a son, a Hocus Pocus Cat, was the open fraternity reserve champion, and Cat's Full Measure with Phil Rapp won the non-pro and finished in a tie for 6th in the open. As I mentioned a while ago, out of the first 7 foals, all 6 that were shown went to the pay window. 13 of the 17 foals in the second crop won money. 10 of the 12 in the third crop earned money. And remember now, all 29 of those foals were out of mares that Jack owned. When one smart-looking cat won the fraternity in 2003, he was one of 7 Highbrow Cat fraternity finalists that year. In 2004, there were 10 fraternity finalists, and in 2006, when OK Felix, another son, won it, there were a record 12. In the 17-year span from 2003 through 2019, 8 of the NCHA fraternity open champions were sired by Highbrow Cat. 4 other fraternity champions were produced by Highbrow Cat daughters, and 2 champions were sired by his son Metallic Cat, who had won the fraternity in 2008. Highbrow Cat's sons have sired the earners of more than $248 million, while his daughters have produced the winners of nearly $81 million. More than 280 of Highbrow Cat's sons and daughters have earned more than $100,000 each, and 8 of his foals have earned more than $500,000 each.
Everything he produced a very trainable animal. You can get a smart dog or a smart horse, but they're not that biddable. Pardon me, that's trainable and horse. And all his get were trainable, even if they weren't that much of an athlete or they didn't do that well. They were very, very trainable. They'd learn anything. And I think that was his biggest success, is he produced an athlete, but he produced one that you could train. Cat's a cutting horse. He's produced more earnings than the race horses. That's unheard of. I mean, we have one show that you can win a couple of $100,000. Other than that, you win $25,000 or $30,000 or $200. The racehorses win millions. And Cat, really, he's got a son or two that's produced more numbers than he did. Not dollars, but more babies than he produced. And he's still way ahead of him. We've got some really foundation horses in the quarter horse, cutting horse, and so on. But in cutting, Cat is the biggest producer of all time and always will be. There might be, every record's made to be broken, and there might be somebody produce more, but they'll have Highbrow Cat behind them in the pedigree. Yeah, and he did it. I mean, it wasn't because I promoted him or I had anything to do with it. It was just that horse.
In 2013, Jack made the decision to sell Highbrow Cat. Although at one time he didn't think he would ever sell him, he decided it was time. The buyer of the 25-year-old horse was Darren Blanton of Dallas. The deal included the 500-acre Wagner ranch at Bridgeport, along with all the equipment and buildings. It also included more than 100 head of other horses that Jack owned, and the remaining inventory of Highbrow Cat's frozen semen. Highbrow Cat had been sterile since age 22.
Then I sold Cat. And I sold Cat because I was getting old, and Darren Blanton bought him, and Darren Blanton had a beautiful ranch and a great place for Cat and people to take care of him, and he just had a great home, and I had dogs and other things, and so I used to go visit him once in a while, and then I couldn't take it anymore.
In March of 2019, a newly formed partnership between Darren and Kelly Crum and his daughter Madison of Beach Fork Ranch in Weatherford, Texas, allowed the Crums to become co-owners of the stallion. Like Darren, the Crums are also very active in the cutting horse business. But in October 2019, 31-year-old Highbrow Cat was humanely euthanized. He is still the all-time leading sire of cutting horses, a title that's likely to stay with him for some time. And according to Q data, he is the all-time leading money-earning sire of the American Quarter Horse Association, with his foals having almost $97 million in earnings. His son, Metallic Cat, is second, with just under $77 million in offspring earnings.
Cat was a funny horse. I didn't get to live with Cat that much. He was either at a trainer's or he was at the stud farm. But when I had him, I spent a lot of time with him. And one time, he was laying in a stall. He had a big stall. He was laying in a stall, and I went in there and put my head down on his chest, and I didn't mean to, but I fell asleep. And hands came out, and they watched, and they, thought, oh my God, if he gets up. And then Shane came over, and he said, that horse woke up, and he kept looking back at you, but he wouldn't move. He wouldn't move. And finally said, you were there for probably an hour. And finally they yelled and woke me up. And only after I got up did Cat get up. He wasn't going to hurt me. But he was that kind of horse. I wish that I could have spent more time with him. He did his job, and because he did his job, I didn't get to spend much time with him. But when I did, we were friends.
Jack loved Highbrow Cat, but so did a lot of other people. He's definitely a legend remembered. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. We will be talking about more good horses, and we'll have more legends remembered. If you're interested in learning more about the earnings of Highbrow Cat or any other horse, you can visit the free QData leaderboards, which update the top 50 sires, dams, money earners, and more every week. Check it out at qstallions.com/leaders.